This is Newsmax Money. I'm Ashley Martella, and we're joined by James Dale Davidson. He's an author, investor, and Wall Street Observer of many years, as well as a regular columnist for Financial Intelligence Report. That's the flagship investment letter of Newsmax Media. Nice to have you with us, James.
My pleasure.
Economists are saying that the economy is in recovery. Do you agree with that?
I think what we have seen in 2009 and so far the few days into 2010 is a simulated recovery, which has been generated by the government faking it a lot of different ways, putting out what I call statistical falsies on the economic numbers to make it seem like the economy is stronger than it is. For example, on January the 8th, we had the unemployment rate for December, which showed a lot more jobs being lost again. But what we did not see in this statistical announcement was the fact that the Bureau of Labor Statistics itself has indicated that they have undercounted the number of unemployed in 2009 by 824,000 persons, which is a substantial miss. They're supposed to be doing a benchmark adjustment, as they call it, early this year, and if they do, the unemployment rate will shoot up even higher. I think a lot of the supposed improvements have been faked by the government. I think they did a very effective job of raising stock prices, and I believe that they used the quantitative easing as a way of funneling money into the market. And it's not a coincidence that the market started to rally in March of 2009 at the same time they announced that they were going to do the quantitative easing. So in my view, it's all created by the government as a hoax.
Latest job numbers just out, 85,000 more jobs lost, but you think things are actually a lot worse than that?
They are. I mean, the government itself says so in the fine print, but they don't. The headline number is 85,000 jobs lost, but they have what they call a birth-death adjustment in these numbers, which is supposed to account for the numbers of jobs created by small companies that are too new to count. And they add an average of 107,000 jobs a month on this preposterous basis that small businesses running out and hiring a lot of people. If this were happening, people would know about it. You don't see companies running out and hiring people. You see companies going out of business. So probably the birth-to-death adjustment should be a minus number, not a positive one.
What does the Obama administration come off with this number of jobs saved? How can they calculate that?
It's a lie. It's a lie. That's the basic thing. Remember Congressman Wilson in a speech in September when Obama was talking to Congress, jumped up and said, "You lie." Now, Miss Manners thought that this was probably worse than if Wilson had basically mooned him.
In this case, he was talking about illegal immigrants being covered under health care reform.
Right, but what I think is that it comes closer to revealing state secrets, that the whole administration is based upon one lie after another. And you may have seen today that Congressman Elijah Cummings, a Democrat, has called for Secretary Geithner to testify under oath about the role that he played in forcing AIG to disguise the fact that they were paying the big banks $65 billion in a backdoor bailout under the guise of settling these credit default swaps.
That's based on email that actually shows them doing precisely that, right?
In other words, they told them to violate the securities laws. Mm-hmm. Let's undertake a fraudulent issue for the banks to raise money, which they did, because the government is telling them not to tell the truth and disclose their actual circumstances to investors.
Talk about that for a second. If you have the email actually documenting this, is Geithner's goose cooked, so to speak?
I don't know if his goose is cooked because he seems to have gotten away with things that if it happened to me...
Like not paying taxes?
Yeah, I would be someplace, right. In stripes.
Overseeing the IRS and not paying taxes.
Yeah, well, it's a good job if you can get it. Right. And I don't, think that he's going to be held to account because he's shown himself to be much more cunning than the people who are trying to hold him to account. I mean, I think the way he handled the AIG bonuses last year is a very interesting, telling story. You may remember back in the early part of 2009, there was a big public uproar about AIG employees getting big bonuses with taxpayer money. And this was basically all the uproar that we could stand about AIG. But it was a misdirection. If you got people all excited about the penny ante stuff, they wouldn't get excited about the $65 billion that they were funneling into the big banks at par. You know, it was a totally hoax job, I think.
Of course, when it came out about the bonuses, that kind of stirred up the public outrage, right?
Right, it kept the public from getting excited about the real issue because you can only get excited about so many things that relate to AIG at once,
Right.
if anything. At least I can't.
Where do you think this AIG thing's going to head?
Well, I think it's going to continue to be in the back burner, and eventually somebody, sometime, is going to recognize what a staged job this whole thing is, that they have violated practically every securities law that exists. They have done everything they can to create a false impression of stability and strength and a rebounding economy. And I can understand that from the point of view of public policy, they want people to think that the economy is strong. But equally, if you hoax people into going out and spending money on false assumptions, and then these things later prove to be false, then a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money because of being misled by this fraud.
James, considering how many investors got burned by this whole thing, do you think Geithner can really hold on to his job?
I'm not sure. I think it'll be interesting to find out, but there's going to be a drama that will unfold in the next few months.
Some hedge funds are buying gold, although prices seem to be stalling. What are your thoughts on gold right now?
I think gold is basically an investment that you have to have in your portfolio, unfortunately, because I think the dollar is cooked. I mean, we have gone through a policy in this country that puts our fiscal ratios worse than the Weimar Republic was before they had hyperinflation, much worse than Brazil was 15 years ago when they had hyperinflation. I have a Brazilian wife, so I have a little bit of insight into Brazil. And from 1980 to 1997, they had a trillion-fold increase in the price level in Brazil. A trillion-fold, according to the IMF. They never once had a deficit worse than a third as bad as our current deficit in terms of percentage of GDP. The highest deficit they ever had was 5.4% of GDP. We had 12.9% last year. So we're skirting in the outer edges of what you can get away with. And I think if you look at the Federal Reserve balance sheet and the statistics that they put out about where the deficit is being financed, you can see that they're lying about that too. There's a very interesting analysis that was done by a Canadian investment manager called Sprott. And Mr. Sprott looked at all the numbers and found that apparently the biggest part of the deficit financing last year, when we had to almost triple the amount of money we borrowed, came from the households of the United States. But the household sector has been under huge stress. It's really incredible to think that that households bought $700 billion worth of new treasury debt last year. It didn't happen. This is a statistical catch-all that they use to disguise the fact that they're faking it, pretending that they can put this money out when they're really printing the money to cover the deficit.
Since you're so down on the dollar, do you really believe that the dollar is on its way out as the reserve currency?
It is on its way out as a reserve currency. How long this takes is a different question. It will probably take a long time, but we're in a very difficult situation. And when you have this type of uncertainty that arises when the government is printing so much money, spending so much out of an empty pocket, there's never anything good that happens as a result. An economist named Herb Stein once said that if something can't go on forever, it will stop. And in my view, you can't go on forever spending money you don't have. It's going to have to stop. And whether it happens this year or next year or sometime soon, it will happen. And when that happens, you'll be glad you have any little bit of gold you can put aside.
All right, besides gold, what are you investing in today, James?
I'm investing in gold stocks. And I think also you need to there's a strong case that can be made for small special situation companies which may be earning great guns. There's one company called Interclick that I like a lot. It's going to have very big earnings growth, I think, in the next report. There are other little companies that are specific, interesting companies that will make profits for investors. But I think I'm investing in Brazil. I think Brazil is on the way.
James Dale Davidson, thanks so much for joining us here at Newsmax Money.
My pleasure.
And you can catch James' columns on the Financial Intelligence Report. I'm Ashley Martella for Newsmax Money. Thanks for watching.
Sarah Palin's new book, Going Rogue in American Life, will be released on November 17th. You can be among the first to get your copy. Check out our incredible free offer for Sarah's new book. Just go to Newsmax.com and click on the top banner for this great offer. Act today.